I almost clicked leave meeting. I'm just going to be honest.
No, and we've just started.
So, all right. I see that YouTube is doing the thing where it shows whoever's speaking. I want to see if I can fix that so that it's, you know, so it's gallery view. Oh yeah, here we go. Gallery view.
Nice.
Okay. Hi everybody. Welcome to.
You sure you got a booster? I mean, what?
Welcome to D3TV episode. I believe this is episode 14. It might be
Boosted.
episode 15.
Episode
Boosted.
15 boosted.
Now back boosted. And today we are here with Jonathan Blessing, CEO of Door3, Bart Michalek, who is the Director of Business Analysis at Door3, and Zev Gottdiener, who's the junior BA on the BA team. And I'm Liz Flyntz, the Director of UX and Design at Door3. And we're going to talk about what business analysis is and who does it and why they do it and when they do it. And other important questions like that.
Generally during business hours, I'd hope.
I mean, I don't know. Bart definitely mixes it up.
So Liz, you're
Bart
making okay, before we get serious, you're making a statement with this less is more, and I'm confused by the statement. What's going on?
I liked this color the best of all of the background colors
yellow.
I had.
You like a yellow background.
It's very mellow.
Today, yeah. I thought it went with my like oatmeal colored sweater. These are the swag items that we got from the Nancy Norman UX and Agile project management class.
Well, I'll give it to him. It's low environmental impact.
Sweater or the background?
The background. So now instead of getting like branded water bottles and stuff, you get like digital swag.
Nice. NFTs?
Digital swag. NFTs.
Yeah. Bart, show your Door3 swag mug. I noticed that you were using the. Yeah.
Oh. It keeps my coffee hot without it being too hot. So it holds on to the heat, but not like too much, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good little middle ground.
So, I thought we could first talk about what business analysis is, because this is actually something that I was unfamiliar with as a separate discipline. I knew it existed, but I hadn't worked with BAs before I came to Door3. So, what is it? Can you two define it?
Sure. So at a high level, it's a set of tasks and techniques that are used by the analyst to liaison between the stakeholders of an organization in order to understand the policies, the operations, and the objectives in order to produce some kind of solution that will solve a particular problem or increase, operational efficiencies within the organization. So at a high level, that's what business analysis in and of itself is, or at least that's the objective that it sets out to achieve.
Zev?
Just on the outside for a second, I would also say it's from our perspective as an organization, it's tip of the spear for us. So when we go into a client environment, we generally go in with our business analysts first in order to kind of ingest and formalize what we need to know in order to begin doing work as software developers.
Yeah, absolutely. The number one thing coming into any new project, the number one objective is to understand first at a high level what it is that the organization is doing, but then more importantly how it's doing it currently and what the future state of the operation should be in the future. So it's really to get a better sense of what it is and how it is that they're currently doing it. That's the number one thing.
Yeah, I think that from a very high level and abstract level, we sort of bridge the gap between the information technology and the developers, and then the business end of it, and the needs of a group of people or a business, something like that. And that this translation through our ability to analyze the situation, like Bart said, how things are unfolding currently, and then their vision of sort of the problems they have and what they want to accomplish. We analyze these to come up with these things called requirements or business requirements, right? That don't directly relate to a piece of software, but then motivate what we end up building.
Yeah,
How do you
absolutely.
think
I mean,
that?
go ahead, Liz.
How do you think that relates to the agile titles like product owner? What's the relationship between the BA and PO?
So the relationship between the BA and the PO is that the BA serves as a bridge between the product owner and the internal development team, right? So we make sure that the product owner is empowered to set forth what it is that they're trying to achieve, and the BA will come in and make sure or do everything that is needed to facilitate and verify that the solution being produced to meet that objective is the proper solution, right? So the product owner determines what, the BA's role is to question that to some degree, verify it, and then work internally with various members of the team in different disciplines to figure out how, right? Because there's a lot of different ways to meet a certain objective or goal, right? But we operate under the constraints of time and budget, right? So under those constraints, there's a lot of different ways where we can, implement a given solution. So, given those constraints, what's at our disposal, and is this the best way of possibly doing it? But to answer your question in short is to Zev's earlier point is that, yeah, we're the bridge between the product owner and the internal development team.
So what do you do to make all this analysis happen? So can you talk a little bit about the stuff that you do or make in an engagement?
Sure. So the biggest single thing that we do is we hold requirement solicitation sessions, right? So after doing an initial deep dive of getting the lay of the land, so to speak, and figuring out what the business landscape is for the organization that we're working with, what we're tasked with doing is holding or conducting a series of interviews to get what we refer to as the as-is state, or the current state, and figure out that in context of this organization, what are the current business flows that are being used to meet what objectives. And so once we conduct those interviews, we then start to formulate a series of questions. What about this workflow is working? What about this workflow isn't working? What is the motivation or drive for trying to find something new? Or why are we, at a fundamental level, why is it, or what is it about this workflow that requires something to be different? What's working about it versus what isn't working about it? And then from there, we figure out who our SMEs or subject matter experts are. And then we break out into smaller sessions to do a greater level analysis at a deeper level to figure out the intricate details of how certain things work. And from there, we collectively piece together all the various things that we've heard about the organization and its workflows to figure out what efficiencies there are to be gained. Right.
What I'm kind of curious, Bart, is to hear you. To hear your thoughts on how so when we begin an engagement, and our Door 3 engagements generally begin with a principal consultant. This is the person who generally brings us into new environments. And how do you find yourself working with our principal consultants on projects and engagements?
Can you maybe asked that question.
How
a
does
little
the
more specifically.
handoff work between, how does the handoff work between the PC and the BA?
So the handoff between the PC and the BA will be that the PC will have a collection of notes and materials that they've gathered throughout the sales process and the engagement process, and they'll hand that over to the BA. The BA will review everything that's been collected and try to familiarize themselves as much as possible with the concepts and what's being said, right?
And presumably you've been there, you're not just showing up after we've closed a new piece of work, you've actually been involved at least at some level in the sales cycle.
Yes, it depends on where in the sales cycle the BA is brought in, right? If they're brought in from the outset, then this handoff is not required. It's really only required if they're brought in the middle of the sales process, right? So that, you know, we can get up to speed as much as possible. But the interaction between the BA and the PC is to figure out why is it that a particular client came to us and what is it that they're trying to achieve. So why are we here in the first place? What is it that they're trying to buy or build, right? And so that's at a high level how that handoff works.
So is this something that only exists in consultancies? Because, you know, the process that you're describing is really a process.
No, it exists in product companies too.
Yeah.
What do you think the differences are in how the BA role exists in a internal product team, for instance?
Yeah, it definitely does work very, very differently, because I've worked as a business analyst at a product company, and obviously I've been here for a number of years now, and the differences are pretty vast actually, right? Because there's pluses and minuses to being at a product company versus at a custom software shop like Door3 is. And those primary differences are constraints, right? When you're working in the context of a set product, you are working within the constraints of how it has historically been built up to this point. And based on how it's been built up, there's a limited series of building blocks you can use and manipulate to make improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with custom software, in many cases, you're working from a completely blank slate. I mean, yeah, there's cases where we're coming in to replace a legacy system. And so, you know, there's certain artifacts left over from that legacy system that, you know, can be leveraged and used to save time and resource, right? But it is fundamentally very, very different in that it's much more of a blank canvas, right? Where you can be a lot more creative. However, with that comes some downsides too, in that given the fact that anything is possible, it's a lot more difficult to figure out what should be done, right? Because if you can do anything, there still is going to be a best way of doing it. And because you are unconstrained, you know, there's a lot more investigation and thought that needs to go into what the best way of achieving something is.
Right, like at the risk of using an analogy, if you think about it, like say you'd like to put in some bookshelves into your living room or something like that. Not that people have books anymore, but and you of course have, you know, a space that you want to fit it in that is so many feet or meters wide and tall and needs to fit, you know, behind this couch or something. And so, you know, a product BA or a BA working at a product company, this is more like the idea of, okay, I have these, you know, constraints, and there's this list, there's an array of products that exists, and I can choose from among them to implement in this certain situation and, you know, troubleshoot all that. And that's a very different sort of, you know, ball of wax than coming into that space and saying, okay, I'm going to build bookshelves from scratch. Because then you have all this, you know, an entire universe of materials and stuff that goes into making bookshelves, rather than just, you know, figuring out which bookshelf that's available that will fit into your space.
Yeah.
I think something. I mean, your question that kind of sparked this discussion. It's interesting to me because, you know, when we try to find new people to work at Door3, regardless of the practice, one of the things that we try to screen for are folks who are right for working at a consulting shop. And because it's different, right? You know, we're always kind of jumping from campfire to campfire here. We're always I think for us it really means inherently looking for people who are ready to learn new domains, new subjects, new ways of doing business, even if you're staying in the same domain. And so I think it takes a certain kind of alacrity of mind to kind of jump around from frame to frame. And I imagine this is particularly true for our BAs, Bart, that you really need to be hungry not only to understand a potential new business, but a new industry, a whole new domain, in a way that would not be true if you were at a product company.
Yeah, I would say one of the main valuable traits of a good BA is an inherent sense of curiosity. But one of the most important skills would be to figure out very quickly on your feet what it is that you do know, what it is that you don't know, and what it is that you need to know. And then most importantly after that would be how to figure it out as quickly as possible. But all of that, again, hinges upon this inherent curiosity about.
I'd
learning
love
how
to know
things
the
work.
technique for figuring out what I don't know.
You talk to people. You talk to people. You talk to
I mean,
stakeholders.
Hey, even the
So-
way you search for things on search engines, you know, it really changes what you see.
Mhm. So once you have done this initial analysis, you know, the way that you're describing this sounds very front loaded to me. But I assume that, you know, BAs have a role throughout the life cycle of a product development. So what happens after this analysis has occurred early on? What's sort of the life cycle of a BA on a product?
So the life cycle is once the initial, we call it discovery. Once the initial discovery is completed, we then turn to synthesis. So we synthesize what it is that we gathered, what it is that we collected, and we come up with an action plan of what needs to be done. From there, we break out the overall objectives into more digestible chunks in the form of a roadmap, epics, and user stories, right? So we'll break down those to define what needs to be built and disseminating that into buckets that are going to be digestible, so we can figure out in what order we should build things in, so that we preserve any dependencies and make sure that things are being built in the right order.
Where do you see the line between that process of developing requirements and the UX process of empathizing with the user?
not that you have any special vested interest in his answer, Liz.
No, yeah, just you know, whatever comes to mind, Bart.
Super cash.
Super cash.
I think that my take and approach on the UX side of things is the same philosophy that I have about, you know, the technical and development or dev side of things, right? Where my purpose and objective is to figure out what needs to be done. That then flows into the how, and the how is split at the dev level and at the design and UX level, right? So my job, if done properly, is to communicate to you what it is that the client needs to see done and what the core functional requirements are, right? What the objectives are. The way I see it is that you then take those and based on your understanding of who the users are, what the personas, who the various actors are, how to lay it out in a way that will best serve, in this case, the software, right? To best serve the user. But my job is to make sure that you know exactly what it is that needs to be done. And my job is to listen and take input from you as far as how it needs to be done, then liaison between you as the designer and the development team to come up with the best way of implementing it, while also in the meanwhile, again, serving as that bridge between what is discussed with design and dev, and then communicating that out to the client and verifying that it meets their needs and expectations as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that it's always a little messier than we, sort of things are initially
Don't tell people
scoped.
that.
I mean, maybe messy is
I
the wrong
liked
word.
Bart's answer a lot, and here you are saying it's messy.
No. I think that the structures are good, and maybe messy is the wrong word. I think maybe, collaborative is the right word, because everyone is sort of like thinking through what the requirements are and what is possible simultaneously, like from their various practice standpoints. Like dev is always thinking about what is being presented as requirements and then how they would build that, and design is thinking about how they would design it. I mean, and then we're thinking about, can dev build this thing that we're suggesting as a design? So I think that, ideally everything is very collaborative and these borders are kind of flexible, but the structure is helpful to have in mind too.
So like, is messy the right or wrong word? I don't know, but the spirit of it isn't incorrect in that what happens is that on a project, there's a series of perspectives, right? There's the business perspective on the workflows, there's the technical perspective on how to best build something in an optimal fashion, and then there's the design perspective as to how to give the user the cleanest, most modern, attractive, functional layout and design for how to achieve it, right? And all three of those pieces may see things a different way, right? There are going to be things that dev pushes back on because of the technical considerations and context of the overall architecture of the application that might make something impossible or particularly difficult to implement from a design perspective, or something from what design had produced. And that pushback also will sometimes be met with some resistance from the UX team, because you guys see how something needs to be built, and this is the way that you think would be best served. And again, what the BA needs to do is to step in within boundaries and mediate between those two parties to make sure that we're designing something that is optimal. And by optimal, I mean, given the time and budget constraints of a project, that we deliver as much as we humanly can to produce the best outcome.
I think that's really key. And then of course, project management steps in to maintain timelines and budgets as well. So we're collaborating with them. That's like the other piece of this that's not in the room with us right now.
I think our project managers, though, would say they've never stepped out.
Yeah, that's true. It's not as though they show up and they're like, what's going on, guys? Looks like you made a bunch of stuff here and was definitely not going to work in this timeline. That's a process that they're trying to keep us in the timeline the whole from the jump. But I think something that is hard to keep in mind is that, like, there's a difference between UX and design, and here we practice both of them simultaneously, but there is in the way that UX and design might interact with project management or with BAs, it's slightly different, so UX is thinking about experience all the way through the product and developing for the user experience as a whole and interaction. And then design is kind of what you produce that you can see. It's the designs that we then ask development to build. So there's a slightly different way that those two pieces interact, and we kind of do
like
both
the
things.
tangible aspect of it, and like the spirit of what it is, that the physical representation of it.
I think people confuse the meaning of business requirements a lot to mean the features of the product or software that's being developed, whereas business requirements drive those things, but it's not a one-to-one relation. And I think that's sort of, whereas the BAs are balancing like Bart says, this sort of triumvirate of like technical aspects of like the, you know, the IT side, the operational aspects, whereas yes, the project managers have the oversight, but operational in terms of, you know, these you know, organizing user stories, epics, you know, exactly the meat and potatoes of developing it. And then the strategic things about the business, what are the business goals, but you know, balancing that with the design and UX so that they intermesh, right? Sort of marrying the two visions and, you know, bridging that gap. Whereas, you know, we have business requirements and what we're going to build. How do we get that together into something that we can actually see?
Yeah, in a weird way, the internal development team, or the internal project team, I should say, it's like an orchestra, and the PO eliciting the requirements is the conductor, right? Our job is to, in concert together, produce a symphony that meets and matches what needs to be done and what needs to be built from a variety of
Well
different
said.
angles.
Yeah, I like that.
Do we have a
So
minute, Liz, for origin stories?
I think we should tell the origin stories.
Origin
I
story.
like,
I love a good. I'm
yeah.
gonna get the popcorn out. I'm gonna relax. Hold on. No.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm always curious how people got to where they are, and especially in you know, jobs in technology. Now, of course, there's tons of people that go to boot camps and come out of a boot camp with a certificate in front-end development, and then they become front-end developers. But in the olden days, that's not how people got into tech jobs. Often people had more diverse backgrounds, or they had a diverse background and then they ended up in the boot camp. So I'm just curious, like, you know, which flavor of business analyst are you? Are you my dream was to be a BA and I went to BA school and I became a BA, or are you I did something else entirely and found my way here?
Did you play oboe in the Portuguese National Orchestra? And you know,
One day,
yeah, one day.
First bassoon.
I saw a billboard, business analyst, become a business analyst today.
Thought it sounded nice, so I figured.
Yeah, how did you get into this racket?
Growing up, I always had a very, very deep love for technology in general. I grew up in a household that had, you know, because I'm first generation, I had parents that were working multiple jobs when I was little. They weren't home too often, so I was often babysat by my older cousin. And he was a huge technologist, all of the latest and greatest state-of-the-art stuff. And by virtue of spending a lot of time with him, a lot of that transferred over to me. And I found a genuine love for computers, especially. He went down the path of becoming a programmer, and I always idolized him, and I always had a natural inclination and love for technology in general. So I kind of followed in those paths. When it came time to go to college, when I was accepted to Lehigh, where I went to school, I initially came in as a computer science major, thinking I wanted to be a programmer, and I did for the longest time. And during the orientation, the head of the department was spinning up a new program at Lehigh, dubbed the Computer Science and Business Program. And this is a new program that was supposed to be bleeding edge, and what the objective of it was to produce technologists that would specifically serve in the consulting space. So what you would do is you would go in, you would get a computer science degree, and you would get a business degree. And then you had courses that met in the middle to bridge that gap between the business side of things and the computer side of things, the technology aspects of it. And I enjoyed the program, right? Because the technology is amazing, but technology in context of something was always more interesting to me, right? Because technology for the sake of technology is very cool because there's the engineering aspect to it, right? But how to use that technology was always something that kind of struck with me. You know, how to use it most efficiently, how to use technology to better serve a business, or not even a business need, but an overall purpose. right? What is the purpose of this thing? How can it be used? But even still, I still thought I was going to be a developer. I wanted to be a developer. I wanted to be a backend developer. Came time to intern. I did front end development work for a marketing company called McCann. And I did pharmaceutical websites. I think some of those websites are still up actually. During my time at McCann, while I was, doing my whole programmer
What were you
stuff.
coding in?
It was mostly JavaScript. It was mostly just front end languages, JavaScript for the most part. A little bit of PHP. PHP Storm, I believe, was the latest and greatest thing at the time.
Storm, I don't know Storm.
Yeah, it was. I don't think I've seen it since, to be honest with you. But there was a project manager there that also served as like kind of like the requirements guy. He's a guy that wore many hats, and he struck a liking with me, and we got to talking, and I realized that I love the development aspect of things, but I really loved what it was that he was doing. And he came from a similar background where he had a technology degree, but he ended up in project management. And through talking with him, I realized that this is a really cool career path. I get to experience the best of both worlds. I get to stay close to the technology and programming aspect of it, but I also get to step into this business role where I get to learn about how different companies work, and I get to learn how it is that they do what they do, and I get the opportunity to take what could be better, mix that with technology, and produce something really cool. And so that's how I got into the business.
Cool. What was your first BA job?
My first BA job was at a product company called Vitech. They produced software that runs pension software. So like their clients would be like major state governments and unions too. Like the big police union would use them, and various teachers unions. They were pension management, and it was cool. I learned a lot about pensions, and I learned about how complicated different business and operational policy rules can be. But it did feel very limiting. It's not exactly, I enjoyed it, but it didn't really satisfy that curiosity after a while for me. That was my first BA job though. I learned a lot on that job.
Cool.
Got to spend a lot of time in Iowa, which let me tell you, in the winter, not that great. Okay, in the summer.
Good views though.
The kid sitting next to me got put on the Bahamas project, which still bothers me.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Zev, what about you?
Yeah. So I'm Zev Gottdiener, and my origin story definitely a bit different. Although being Bart, it didn't remind me. I also grew up in a household with technology from a young age. My dad was a writer, so I remember him getting like a Zenith data system in 1980 something. One of those ones you have to program yourself, right, on like MS DOS, and we programmed like Reader Rabbit or Math Rabbit or some games on it, for my brother and I. But I definitely, in my young adulthood, my interests have always been sort of in like the human dimension of things. So my background is in anthropology and geography, and I came to Door3. This is my first time in a BA role, and I came to Door3 from academia. I was an anthropology professor, but I'm a cultural anthropologist. My focus was always on this still an emerging field. It's known as human technology, or sometimes human computer interaction. So I was interested in specifically in development and international development, how technology, and especially geographic technologies, were changing the way that people were going about the business of development. Everything from land use and ownership all the way up to infrastructure and urbanization and things like that. But in my research, I used a lot of what's sometimes called like soft GIS or participatory GIS tools. So these are like open source or simple software that is used to gain sort of public information or involve the public in some of these endeavors and scientific understanding to the political sphere. And so as I did this work, I just got more and more involved in the creation of these softwares and using them with people. And the insights into, how technology is affecting our daily lives. I mean, these are something that's widely known at this point, but 15 years ago, it was something that really caught my interest, and I thought was going to be an emerging area of the field that I wanted to be involved in, especially as someone whose sights have always been on doing applied work rather than theoretical work. And so in the last few years, when I found myself, dedicating most of my time to teaching and activities in the university, I became more and more interested in branching out into, the other sectors in which that I could have more of a hands-on experience, and discovering roles in project management or human resources, and trying to find sort of something that hit on not only my interests, but my skill sets. Like you said, I'd heard about business analysis, but up until a couple of years ago, I wasn't terribly, I didn't know a ton about it, but the more I learned, the more it became something I was really interested in. And like I said, this is my first time in the role here at Door3, but it's absolutely ticked all the boxes in terms of what fulfills me and what the kind of work that I like to do, and the kind of challenges that I like that keep me active, right? And I think this discussion has shown there's a lot of subtleties involved in a lot of stuff that I think I can bring some understanding to the table about.
Mhm.
I could definitely see how your background would lend a very particularly interesting perspective, and I'm wondering how do you see the requirements, the business needs? How do you view what it is that a company needs to do from your particular lens, given that you have this anthropology background?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was specifically, right, that's kind of the thing but in general, I think a lot of companies or organizations in general, they might have an idea of what the problems that they're experiencing feel like from like a subjective point of view, but a lot of times the case that whereas they might lack the sort of objective, top-down view on what's exactly happening within their organization, and also they might not exactly know sort of the route to take, the solutions available, or even which ones to choose. Anthropologists look at that as like a basic way we do analysis between the subjective and the objective views of the world around us. But specifically, I wish I had sort of the cartoon here. I know there's a famous one where it's a swing, and the client comes to the dev team and they want a wooden swing that can hang from a tree, and then the developer makes like a swing that's attached to the side of the tree, and then how it's described is that there's a swing next to a tree and it's not even attached, and all they really needed was just an old tire swing, right, just to swing on or something like this. So software development or technology consulting is similar to a lot of human systems, in that in order to elucidate, in this case, these requirements, it's not as simple as, say, handing out a survey or having a set of questions that can be automatically answered. And it includes things like developing rapport and these kinds of working relationships, going out and learning a ton about a new area of industry or a market that nothing about, but that's key, that you need to know something about and understand in order to work with a client. These kinds of things are all sort of blends between the world of ethnographic and social science fieldwork and the type of technology consultancy that we do at Door3.
It's interesting that you say that too. because what I found often happens, especially earlier on with some of my first projects, is I very quickly came to see that there was the perspective of the problem from a managerial standpoint or view. But
You
then
mean
when
on
it
the
came
client
down
side?
on the client side, yes.
Yeah.
The stakeholder would define the problem as being this, and that, you know, what they really need to see happen is that. And then you would take that, you accept it, you would try to disseminate it, and then it came down as a time to, as I mentioned earlier, do the breakouts where you would start to talk and interview subject matter experts, and they were typically lower level employees that were actually in many cases using the system, in many cases of enterprise platforms and stuff like that, and you would get a completely different story. I mean, the plot would be the same, but the twists and turns would be very, very different, where you would get a different take or perspective on the problem. And that didn't mean that the managerial side of things was incorrect. It didn't mean that the individual employee was incorrect. It meant that the truth was somewhere in the middle, right? And that perhaps taking at face value one or the other was maybe not the best approach. That further investigation and curiosity need to be taken into consideration when designing and developing the solution. And I feel like, you know, given your background, that's something that might come as a natural thing for you. This concept of taking into account various perspectives and where we were versus where we're going.
Yeah. I think it's interesting.
The parts don't equal the whole.
Yeah.
Sorry, Liz, go on.
Yeah, I just think that it's interesting to think about your backgrounds, because obviously we have additional BAs here at Door3, but the two of you seem like a particularly good team. You know, Zev, your background is more observational. It's about you know, the practice of anthropology is to observe primarily and analyze, and not necessarily to intervene, but the process of developing is a creative process, essentially. Like, you are making things that do intervene, that do produce like a new set of parameters and alter reality in some sense. So I think that it's interesting to think about it from those two directions. Like, it's the observational piece is key, but also what we do is to intervene into the observed reality. That is like sort of the name of the game, is like, we're making stuff for clients. And in order to figure out what we need to make, we have to be careful observers.
Well,
absolutely.
Maybe in order to figure out what the right stuff to make is.
Yeah, and I think that's at least from what I see in comparing, like I said, it's my first role, but in comparing sort of what I've seen in other people's experience in tech consultancies and other BAs and developers that I've talked to, you know, at Door3, that drive to the why, you know, because there's consultancies out there. You come with an idea. Here's our problem. Here what we think, you know, we should do, and they say, okay, great. Here's how we'll implement it. Here's how we'll build it, and boom. And by the end of it, you get something that no one wants, needs, or fulfills, you know, what they actually need. So the drive to the why, you know, to uncover those layers, you know, I think that is a root of, you know, not only Door3's success, but that's the root of successful, you know, analysis, right, of understanding the world around us, right?
This is what we think about and this is what we think about in UX as well. Is like,
sure,
you know, it's important not to accept the given solution. So often, you know, as you're saying, Bart, like, management will have a concept of what the problem is, and they may even have gone so far as to come up with a solution to that problem. But it's important to you know, use the outsider perspective and analysis that's possible in our roles to really look at the problem with fresh eyes and determine, you know, what, like, before we hastily rush into solution world, let's define the parameters of this problem and then think through how it can be resolved, you know, rather than just accepting a solution.
I really look forward to having this discussion again, because this has been fascinating, but not immediately in the wake of getting my COVID booster shot, because I feel like I've been run over by a truck.
Well,
I see that you're fading out.
Yeah.
You're gonna
Yeah, I
catch
mean-
a cold outside.
Yeah,
I stepped
Well-
outside.
in the snowy wasteland. Yeah.
Gotta get over to the beach.
Wasteland.
Yeah.
This is my neighborhood. Wasteland. Listen to you.
One man's neighborhood, another man's wasteland,
Right.
right?
I'm the man with the wasteland. All right. Well,
I'm trying
I
to
think-
slim
I think
down
that's
my
a-
wasteland.
I think this is a good place to wrap before we hear any other jokes.
So
So
sorry.
thanks everybody. This has been another episode of D3TV, this time with business analysis.
Boost.
Take care,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Boosted.
Bye.
Bye.